couple of weeks ago I told the story of Ruth using Playmobil. Now, we were inundated with people saying how much they loved the process. Two people said they quite liked the fact we'd done that. So today I've decided I'm going to notch it up a level. Every sequel needs to be bigger and better than the last one. So here we have Jeremiah, told in Lego. Jeremiah, messenger from God. Looks a little bit like Harry Potter. King Nebuchadnezzar, king of all of Babylon. The false prophet Hananiah. But not Hananiah from the story of Daniel. He was obviously a good guy. Looked a bit like a stormtrooper. Not so much like Voldemort. This Hananiah. The people. All of the people, some of which were owls, and some were C-3PO. Batman. The people. So a lot of you know that I love the Old Testament, and I love linking the Old Testament with the New Testament and the good news of Jesus in the New Testament. Now, the Old Testament has lots of little Bible verses, little hints that everyone really loves. And today we're going to talk about Jeremiah 29:11, and this is one of those verses that everyone just sits there and goes, "Whoa, I love that one," because it sounds so positive and encouraging, and this is how it goes. You'll know it if you don't click it from the Bible verse. As soon as I say, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Now that's really, really encouraging. But actually, I think we need to look at the context of the Bible verse to gain a deeper understanding of what this verse really means. So here's little Lego Jeremiah. Now, he's a prophet. He's tasked with bringing the news, often bad, from God to the people. Now, the Israelite people were a funny old bunch, nearly as funny as Adam's collection of Lego here. And God spoke to his people through these prophets. And the prophets often brought warnings. The prophets often brought sort of bad news, and they were often really disliked because of the bad news they brought. Now, in the book of Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah says, "You have gone against God's laws. You have broken God's laws. You've gone against God's ways. And if you're not careful, the Babylonian people will come and you will go into exile for 70 years. Now, exile is a horrible word to the Israelites because remember the Egyptians, remember the exile. They broke out of it. Jeremiah says it might come again. Now, the people didn't listen to Jeremiah and they didn't change their ways, and so the king of Babylon, looking a little bit like a droid from Star Wars, the king of Babylon came, he beat the Israelite army, and they went into exile, into Babylon. Now, just before our lovely verse in Jeremiah 29 comes, of course, Jeremiah 28. And in Jeremiah 28, we're introduced to this Voldemort-y looking chap, Hananiah. As I said, not the Hananiah of the story of Daniel, it's a different one. This Hananiah gave the people just a little bit of hope. He said, it'll all be sorted within 2 years. We'll be out of exile within 2 years. And then he says, thus says the Lord. Now, back into the story comes Jeremiah. And Jeremiah says, no, it will be 70 years. It will be 2 or 3 generations that we will be in exile. And this obviously is really, really bad news for the people of Israel. Just really horrible news, not what they were looking for. I think the 2 years from Hananiah sounded doable. 70 years of exile, Jeremiah said. Now, without knowing the context of Jeremiah, we can misread this verse. People often read Jeremiah without the context around it. And that means that people often see Jeremiah 29:11 as if it's God talking directly to me, an individual talking to an individual. But it wasn't. It was actually a prophet, a messenger from God, talking to all of God's people and talking to them in this horrible situation of exile. They'd just been beaten. They were just in exile again. It's like they were repeating history. The exile from Egypt, the exodus out of the situation, all the jubilation around that, and now they're back again under the control of the Babylonians. And the horrible, horrible news from Jeremiah that this will be 70 years long. Now, Hananiah tried to give them a false hope. It'll only be 2 years. Now, Hananiah died. And Jeremiah carried on with this just mind-numbing timescale. 70 years we will be stuck here. 70 years. But God says, I know the plans I have for you. Plans not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. And this is a verse comparing Hananiah's false hope of 2 years with Jeremiah's message of God's real hope, that although you'll be in exile for 70 years, God knows you and God has it, and the situation is God's and He's still in charge. So when we read that verse again, when we look at it and try and bring it into today's culture, into now, into the situation around us, during lockdown, during COVID, what is this passage, what is the message of this passage got for us now? But God is still in control. God has real hope. He's still got this. It may not look like it. It might look horrible. It might seem like a long time. It might feel like it's dragging on. But God has it. Trust in God and His hope, not humans and their false hope, their messages of false hope. And look at the situation we're in now. COVID feels like it's dragging on and on and on. We're hearing bad news upon bad news upon bad news. We're getting sucked into the human thinking. False hope, false thoughts, arguments about this and that. We're all getting sucked in. I'm doing it. Change your focus. Latch onto the true hope of God. This actually wasn't a message for me personally and individually. This was a message for the people of God. Stand firm. God has it.